So, hello, welcome to the new session of Premade Pro, and today we will start the next topic of the ongoing chapter, the body fluids and the circulation. Yesterday I have completed till cardiac cycle. Now today we are going to discuss about the cardiac output and different topics inside the cardiac output. What is the cardiac output, along with a brief description of the ECG. Okay, so yesterday I have completed with the cardiac cycle. Now today we will start with cardiac output. So before starting the cardiac output, I would like to draw a graph of the cardiac cycle, which will be very much useful for making the mind maps before the examination. But if you just grasp this picture in your mind, so you will get a brief knowledge of the cardiac cycle in just 1 second. Okay, so I am drawing a picture of cardiac cycle so that you can get it. Okay, now please see. Okay, so let's consider this as pressure per millimeter of mercury on the x-axis. So x-axis defines mercury pressure, y-axis denotes the time. Sorry, the y-axis denotes the pressure and the x-axis denotes the time. Okay, in millisecond. Now you see just okay. Let me draw first. This is the graph, the cardiac cycle. Generally, this graph is followed in the normal patients. Okay, now this is the, here you can say this is the contraction of the atria, that is the atrial contraction. This is the atrial contraction. Now here the semilunar valves open. Here opening of semilunar valve. Okay, now this is the step 1. Okay, be it step 2, and this is the step 3. Here the semilunar valve closes. Okay, this is the relaxation of the ventricle. the relaxation of ventricle. The ventricle is relaxed here. Relaxation of ventricle. Now here the contraction of the ventricles. Contraction of ventricles. Okay. Now here you can say the atrioventricular valves open. Okay, now here is the relaxation of the ventricle. Here the relaxation of ventricle. Here the relaxation of the ventricle. Okay. Now here what happens here? Atrial AV valve closes. So here you can write left ventricle. After that, phase 1 is left ventricle, phase 2 is left atrium, and phase 3 is aorta. Okay, just remember this graph. By this graph you will get a brief idea and the full clear idea about the cardiac cycle. Now come to the next part. Okay, come to the next part. This is the graphical representation of cardiac cycle. Okay, this is the graphical representation of the cardiac cycle. Okay, now we come to the next part. Just make a note that the atrial systole is of 0.1 second. Okay, the ventricular systole consists of 0.3 second. Okay, and the joint diastole, it comprises of 0.4 second. So the total cardiac cycle, therefore the total cardiac cycle therefore is of 0.8 second. This question comes in the Neet. Okay, what is the total time duration of the cardiac cycle? The total time duration of the cardiac cycle is 0.8 second, out of which the atricular systole is of 0.1 second, the ventricular systole is of 0.3 second, the joint diastole is of 0.4 second. Okay, now there are two prominent heart sound. Okay, just give a topic, heart sound. Question also comes from here, heart sound. When you place a stethoscope over the chest, you get the two heart sound. One heart sound is the closure of the AV valves, and the second heart sound is the closure of the semilunar valves. Heart sound generally comes from the closure of the valves, not from the opening of the valves. So remember, the question comes in the Neet. So from the, let it be the lub or the dub, from where the lub sound generates. That is, when the lub sound generates, it generates from the closure of AV valves. Okay, so the lub is the first heart sound. Okay, so it is lower in pitch. Significance is lower pitch. Lower pitch means the sound which has lower pitch generally hears louder in your ear. Okay. The second one is it generates from the closure of AV valve. That is, the love sound is generated by the closure of AV valves, that is of bicuspid and tricuspid valve. The second heart sound. The second heart sound comes from it is the second heart sound. Okay, it is higher pitch. It is closure of semi-lunar valve. Okay, the dub is the second heart sound. It is higher in pitch and closer of the semi-lunar valve. Okay, so one cardiac cycle is equal to 1 heartbeat. So 1 heartbeat equals to 1 cardiac cycle. 72 heartbeat in 60 seconds is the generalized rate. So 1 heartbeat is equal to 72 by 60. So one cardiac cycle completes in 0.8 second. Okay, got it? How the duration of the heartbeat is calculated? Okay. So now come to the cardiac output. Cardiac output. So what is the cardiac output or CO? I will write CO in the next writings. In every time I don't write cardiac output, I will write CO. So just remember, CO is not carbon monoxide, it's of cardiac output. Okay. Cardiac output can be calculated by CO is equal to stroke volume multiplied by heart rate. So what is the stroke volume? Stroke volume क्या है? Stroke volume is the amount of blood that is ejected by each ventricle in each beat. Okay. So stroke volume is considered as SV and heart rate is HR. Okay. So cardiac output amount, it is, what is the cardiac output? Amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute. It is cardiac output. Now stroke volume is amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per beat. Okay. Number of beats per minute. Okay. Now, what is the cardiac output? Cardiac output, that is 72 beats per minute into each stroke volume is of 70 ml of blood. So 72 by into 70, that comes to 5040 ml. So cardiac output is 5 liters of blood per minute is pumped out by the heart. Cardiac output is approx 5 liters blood pumped out per minute, pumped out by heart per minute. Okay. Now come to the next point. What is the next point? So we come to the next point as endo. What is the endodiastolic volume? This information you will never get in any books or any question paper. This time Neet question paper maybe get harder. because to increase the difficulty and to segregate the number of aspirants, so Neet question may come harder. So I am getting you a brief about each topic. I am teaching you in details. Okay, this type of teaching you will never find in any YouTube or in any books. Okay, these are the some questions are from being medical, because question can be asked from here. Okay, end diastolic volume, end diastolic volume, end diastolic volume. So what is the end diastolic volume? Amount of blood filled in the ventricles at the end of ventricle at the end of ventricular डायस्टोल. वेंट्रिकुलर डायस्टोल के बाद जितना ब्लड रह जाता है वेंट्रिकल में वही क्या जाता है? एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम. सो another is end systolic volume. So end systolic volume, you already guessed what is end systolic volume. End systolic volume, so it is amount of blood filled in the atrium, not atrium, amount of blood filled in the ventricle at the end of the systole. Okay, that is called the end systolic volume. Next we come to okay, I am drawing a picture. Let it be the heart, cheapest heart. It is the cheapest heart. Okay, this is the 70 ml. What is 70 ml? Stroke volume. Okay, the blood which is pumped out by the ventricle. This is the stroke volume, and this is also a stroke volume. It is from the right atria, and this is from the left atria. Pulmonary. This is from the pulmonary artery, and this is from the pulmonary vein. Okay, so here remains 50 ml end diastolic. Okay. Now end systolic volume. Systolic के बाद ऐसा ही रह जाता है. Okay. Now come to the next part. That is, please note one thing. Note, in case of any athletes, the athletes do not follow this type of calculations. In athletes, we can find that there is much higher cardiac output than normal humans, because their size of ventricle is more, end diastolic volume is more, strength of ventricle is more, ventricle contraction more, hence stroke volume is more, cardiac output 10 is more. Okay, now come to ECG. ECG. To record the electrical, to record what is the ECG? ECG is a graph. What the graph records? It records the electrical activity of the heart. To record the electrical activity of heart, a device known as, used to call as electrocardiogram, that gives it graphical representation known as electrocardiograph. So what is ECG? ECG is the graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart. From the ECG we generally find the basic condition of the heart. Okay, so to obtain a standard ECG, 3 electrodes are used. To detect a standard ECG, 3 electrodes are used, but generally we prescribe of 12 electrodes ECG. 12 bits ECG are being prescribed nowadays. Okay, 3 electrodes are used. One electrode is connected to each wrist and one to the left ankle. Okay. Now more electrodes can be connected. More electrodes can be connected to chest region depending upon the diagnosis. Generally we prescribe as 12 lead ECG because it is very much it has much medical value and medical significance. Okay, now comes to the electric ECG graph. Okay, P, Q, R, S, T. We'll write 1 beat equals to 1 P wave, 1 QRS and 1 T wave. Okay, 1 beat equals to that. Now number of QRS wave in a given period of time, given time period, that is called the heart rate. Okay, this is P wave, Q minus and T wave. T wave, generally T wave detail, end of T wave represents end of ventricular systole, end of ventricular systole. Okay. Now, what does the P wave denotes? This here question comes from this only. So, what does the P wave? P wave signifies atrial depolarization. Atrial depolarization, that is atrial contraction leads to atrial systole. PQ. Q wave, you can say QRS complex. QRS complex, atrial PRS complex represents ventricular depolarization, that is leads to ventricular systole. Now the T wave represents ventricular systole, or that begin immediately after Q wave. After the Q wave, this T wave begins. In T wave, return of the ventricles from the excited state to normal. So that is called the repolarization. It is called repolarization of ventricle. Okay. So up to this we have understand the ECG. I think you will not get any problem rather than understanding this ECG, but try to get this note written by your own hands in the copy while listening the lecture. It will make the lecture reading twice useful as reading twice or thrice if you write it by hearing it, the lecture, if you write it on your own. Okay. So I am teaching you a bit slowly because you need to grasp the concept. रट्टा मार के तो कोई MBBS नहीं निकलेगा बेटा, रट्टा मार के MBBS नहीं निकलेगा. So you need to understand the concept, because if you clear the concept, the exam is not tough to crack. Okay. So till today we have completed up to ECG. I'll see what is remaining in the next part, and I will complete it in one lecture. One more lecture I will complete the chapter. Okay. So till then, please subscribe the channel and share it with your friends so that we all can grow better. And till then, good night.